I'm Dr. Tim Worden. I'm a clinical psychologist, also a neuropsychologist, so I tend to come at my therapeutic approach and the approach to addictions from kind of a neuroscience point of view. And I'm also the clinical director of the program. We really care about being a genuine and in-depth dual diagnosis program. The dual diagnosis means we work on both recovery and on the emotional work. And the recovery, we go into depth. We'll go way beyond just giving some worksheets and talking about important topics. We have a very strong relapse prevention plan that is really put together to reflect what a person needs to be able to maintain long-term sobriety. It is detailed. It is filled with the strategies that people need to deal with the inevitable desires to drink or to use into the future, behavioral strategies to be able to distract themselves from the inevitable craving and desires to use, emotional strategies to deal with their emotional stress, the dysregulation that's the number one trigger for relapse. We go into depth of walking out with strategies to deal with their emotions, cognitive strategies, ways to talk to themselves, new thoughts to put in their head to help direct them towards thinking differently to help them not relapse. We also do motivational strategies, and this is different than other programs. I tend to believe that people relapse because a relapse prevention plan is not strong enough. The strategies aren't able to deal with the inevitable desires to use. People stop relapsing because they feel like not relapsing. You actually have to get down there and have the emotional and motivational, visceral experience that yes, I'm going to want to drink or use, but I also want to not use. And we have them connect to the deep motivations and the emotions that are necessary to motivate them to not use. That's informed from kind of a neuroscience point of view. You just can't think your way out of it. You got to feel like not relapsing. And we work on specific strategies to elicit that. So the depth of our relapse prevention plan is just, it's par none. It's very, very strong. So that's the recovery piece. And we also work on aftercare, making sure a person has, a place to continue to work after they leave here. We care a lot about that aftercare plan. So all that's part of the recovery piece. But what we're really known for is the depth that we work on emotionally. That we're not afraid to work on the deepest, most important emotional issues. There's some lore out there that no, they're not ready to work on their trauma. They're not ready to do the deep emotional work. I say they're more ready than ever. The vast majority of people are miserable enough that now they're ready to work on the hardest piece. So I believe in going in depth and deal with find the most difficult pieces to work on emotionally and shift them. A whole lot of things will shift right along with it. The psychotherapeutic approach that we take here at Reflections kind of has three levels to it. The first is just conceptual. Sometimes it's really helpful to give a client new concepts that they hadn't heard before on working with issues of guilt and shame, for example, or communication skills to resolve arguments. Sometimes it's helpful just to give them some concepts. Just hearing new concepts, new ways of looking at something can start that process of them challenging their own thinking and coming up with new ways of believing. But I don't believe just because you use some of the information, everything has changed. You got to go down there and make the changes. The second level of change is a true cognitive change. That you're assisting the client through writing assignments, through working in the psychotherapeutic process to challenge old ways of thinking, coming up with new ways of believing, fundamental beliefs about themselves and about the world. You got to change the way a person thinks and believes. But that's not enough. You got to go down there and change the emotions. Just because you think differently, true change hasn't happened. You have to actually shift a person's emotions. They have to start allowing new emotions to be coming in as part of their life. They regulate old emotions, be able to decrease the anxiety and anger, add new emotions that they can connect with, that give them a sense of being content and maybe believing in themselves. So it's more than just a thought process. It's a cognitive and emotional process that has a lot of depth to it. It's one of the reasons why we need to be working 4 days a week individually with the client, with their primary therapist, and 1 to 2 days a week with me to get down to that emotional process and shift that. You do that, then those changes from a brain perspective can then become permanent changes in the brain. Our treatment is informed by understanding what addiction is from a brain perspective. Well, there's 6 tasks for that. And they're tasks, by the way, not stages. You're working on all 6 at the same time. First task is emotional regulation. That from a brain perspective, for brain reasons, emotions, dysregulation, stress is the number 1 trigger for relapse. Well, you better have some good, solid emotional regulation, stress management skills to deal with these inevitable life stressors that are going to hit you, that are going to cause that dopamine spike, that are cause that desire to use. So task 1, learn good emotional regulation skills. Get yourself back into your window of tolerance. I can tolerate that emotion. Keep yourself from getting so emotionally dysregulated. We do that in spades here. But the second is to actually deal with underlying emotional issues, not just how to deal with daily life stressors, but get rid of core, deep emotional issues that are also creating the stress every time you're reminded of it. And there's certain patterns that we see here. I've been doing this over 25 years. I've been, hundreds and hundreds of clients. I see similar patterns. One of them is coping with loss and sadness, unresolved loss. Very common theme. We have a system of getting down there, understanding the mourning process and helping a person through that process of coping with loss. Another is dealing with unresolved anger and resentments. We have processes here that the therapist will work with on the forgiveness process, forgiving yourself, forgiving others. It's an important piece, a common theme that needs resolution. A really common theme is unresolved guilt and shame. If there's one thing we do here, we do very well of this common theme of dealing with guilt and shame. We have a system of self-acceptance that's really different than other approaches. We don't work on just building a person's self-worth and self-esteem. We have a completely different approach that completely makes this deep sense of shame be able to resolve that. I don't care how many years a person has been walking out with shame. I don't care how many therapists they've seen for it. We have an ability to be able to disintegrate this unrelenting guilt and deal with these deep issues of shame, which is a really common theme of people coming in. But there's others too, anxiety. Maybe anxiety from trauma, maybe not from trauma. You don't have to have trauma to have anxiety, but we're perfectly capable of working down on deep, traumatic, difficult emotional issues that's leading to anxiety or other sources of that anxiety. It's one of the key things you have to be able to work on in order to help a person not relapse. Another one is relationship issues. Common to have people have dysfunctional and problematic relationships. We help with communication skills, help to resolve. We have a whole family component to the program. Our individual therapists will make decisions with the client. How many sessions want to be devoted to actual family work, working with that person or persons that are key people, with the therapist individually, and with the therapist and the client there. And then we have a family day at the end, an intensive day where they go through and work with every therapist and see the progress that that person has done. That's usually a very important piece. First task is working with the emotional regulation. The second task is getting rid of those deep emotional issues that are commonly there. But I don't care how much great emotional work you do, you still need a relapse prevention plan. Your brain is now wired to want that drug or that alcohol. You better be prepared for the inevitable desires to use, and that's what relapse prevention is. Specific, tangible strategies to deal with those inevitable desires to use. That's the third task. The fourth task is to create that life worth living without the alcohol, without that substance. I think it's part of relapse prevention to create that life worth living without it. And we do it in a detailed way. We give a person a life satisfaction questionnaire that evaluates 12 areas that we all need for life satisfaction based on the research. How satisfied were you in each of those areas while you were still using? Then we give the questionnaire a second time. How satisfied can you realistically be a year from now without using? And then we get about the process of creating a life plan. What using, understanding what the research says gives us life satisfaction. How can you put actions and activities that are going to give you a deeper sense of satisfaction? But I want to go beyond what the research says. I want to know what they say. I give them a values clarification inventory. What are your personal values in life? What are your top 15 most important values? And how can we manifest those values into action and behavior? It's not enough to have values. You gotta live your values. I don't think there's a quicker way to get at life satisfaction than living the most important things in your life. We have a whole system based on the research, based on their personal values, to create this life satisfaction plan, actions and activities that translate their values into specific endeavors, specific actions. And then based on this long list, we have them set some goals, make some commitments, track their commitments every day, recommitting every day. We call that a life satisfaction plan. I think it's part of relapse prevention. If your life is so full of misery and discomfort, it's so much easier to say, screw it, I'm just gonna go ahead and drink. But if you got that life worth living, you're much less likely to relapse. That's the fourth task. The fifth task is to create a strong recovery environment for yourself, activities, people that can support this ongoing recovery. People who use other people in recovery are much less likely to relapse. To have somebody to call when that inevitable dopamine spike, that desire to use. Sometimes you get the bear, but sometimes the bear gets you. Sometimes that dopamine spike is too strong and you need other people to help you. People that create a recovery environment. People, actions, activities, dedicated recovery, much more likely to not relapse. And we're very non-dogmatic here. It doesn't have to be the 12th step. Whereas other processes that we use, Life Ring, more cognitively oriented programs, the Buddhist oriented programs, Smart Recovery. We allow people to go to these different mediums. We want them to experience a plethora of different recovery environments, and then they piece together their own. We want them to find the one that works for them. So a strong recovery environment is a good predictor of outcome. The last task is good physical health. There's a warehouse full of years of studies showing good physical, biological health helps emotional health. Well, there's a subset of those studies that show good biological health decreases cravings. How? Get neurotransmitters back into better balance with the right nutrition, the right sleep, the right exercise, the right medication if necessary. Good physical health is part of recovery. So those 6 tasks: good emotional regulation, deal with the underlying core emotional issues that are also driving a person to use, and get a strong relapse prevention plan, strategies that'll help them deal with the inevitable desires to use in the future. Creating that life worth living without the substance. Good recovery environment and good physical health. That is our program. Every individual session, every group, even weekend activities are doing one of those 4 things. And we want them to continue to do it outside of here. And those tasks are all informed by the neuroscience of addiction and understanding what addiction actually is.